All right, guys, we're going to do a summary quickly of yesterday's daf. I think that is actually very helpful. I don't know if you found it helpful, but I think it's essential because we need it. So, all right, we're discussing this whole issue of Reish Lakish and what's his issue. Because, say, for example, this is the Mishnah. If Shimon was the one holding the beam first, right? And then Ruvain was the one holding the barrel. So now Reish Lakish poses a question. If a cow was crouching in the Rishus HaRabim, which is the public domain, and another cow was walking and it kicked the crouching cow, it's exempt. Okay? If the crouching cow kicked the walking cow, it's liable. That we know, that's clear. So the suggestion is our Mishnah supports Reish Lakish. Why? Because if Shimon was holding the beam and he was in front and the jug broke on the beam, Shimon is exempt. Why is he exempt? Because we're saying here that the owner of the pitcher or the jug or the barrel walked too fast and he didn't pay Shimon correctly, was walking with the beam. However, if Shimon stopped, Shimon must pay, because unless he obviously notifies the barrel owner behind him, because this is equivalent to the crouching cow that was kicking a walking cow, and the damager must pay. Why? Because who was acting irregularly here? It's the person with the beam. He's the one that stopped all of a sudden without notification. And so to a crouching cow, a cow has no reason to crouch in the public domain because it's meant to have a certain amount of movement. And therefore, the crouching cow acted irregularly. And therefore, if it then kicked the walking cow behind it, it's definitely liable because it was acting irregularly. But if the walking cow kicked the crouching cow, we learn from Reish Lakish's rule that this is not irregular behavior, because you can act irregularly to somebody that acts irregularly towards you first. So, but it's very difficult to prove that from the Mishnah. The only thing that we can prove is that in this case, it would suggest to support our Mishnah, because if the beam owner, just like the crouching cow, damaged the walking cow, it's liable. Why? Because that was the one that acted irregularly. Fine. But there's a question on this particular Mishnah. What's the question? Well, very, very simply, the part of Reish Lakish's law is obvious, right? In other words, the Mishnah opposes what might be inferred from Reish Lakish. But Reish Lakish obligated the crouching cow when it kicked. Okay? But had it passively damaged, it would be exempt. What does this mean? Is that if the crouching cow kicked obtrusively, then he has to pay. But if it passively damaged, what do we mean by passively damaged? And in other words, the other cow smacked into it and got injured as a result of smacking against this crouching cow that suddenly got decided to sit down. So why don't we obligate the owner of the crouching cow? Because the crouching cow acted irregularly. Well, two reasons we're going to find out later, which we did yesterday, is number one, the road was a very wide road. And since it was a wide road, the owner of the walking cow should have seen that the cow in front of it was crouching, and therefore steered his walking cow away from it, because there was plenty of road enough for both of them. So therefore, if his walking cow walks normally but crashes in the crouching cow, he's got no claim. Why? Because, as the owner, he should have done something. But however, if the crouching cow kicks the walking cow that walked on top of it in self-defense to try and get the cow off of it, he's obligated. And that was the chiddush. What's the chiddush? Is you would say that why should the crouching cow be obligated if it kicks the cow that's walking on it in self-defense? Because why shouldn't it be obligated? Because it was just defending itself. And we say no, it is obligated because it was acting irregularly by crouching in the first place. That's number one. Okay. So in that case, we say it would. So Reish Lakish is saying that the crouching cow, when it kicked, had it passively damaged, it would be exempt. In this Mishnah, Shimon, who got the beam on top of him, is liable for passive damage. what do we mean by passive damage? He never rammed into the barrel behind him or the jug. He stopped suddenly and the jug owner smacked into him. So that's considered passive damage. So in our Mishnah, it's saying that, hang on, the beam owner is liable for the passive damage it causes to the barrel owner because the barrel owner walked into him. But why is the beam owner liable? Is because he didn't notify him in the warning. And why? Because man is always liable for things he does, whether awake or asleep, in a state of awareness or unawareness, etc., which is different to a cow. So you're not responsible if your cow becomes a boar in the public domain, because if your animal becomes a boar in the public domain and another animal is injured by it, you never created the boar, the pit, the obstruction, the hazard in the public domain. And therefore, you're not obligated to control the mount of your cow. Further to which the road is wide enough, which means that the person could veer around your crouching cow. So we're saying this is against that so-called interpretation that the Mishnah follows Reish Lakish. You can see here that it doesn't, because it obligates the owner of the beam, even though he passively broke the barrel. It was the beam owner that walked into him because he didn't give correct notice. Fine. Now that we've got this, the answer is in the Mishnah, Shimon's beam blocked the entire road, making it impossible for Reuven to pass. So that's a suggestion that's offered. And regarding the cows, there was no room to walk to the side of the crouching. There was room to walk on the side of the crouching cow. So what we said here is exactly that, is that the Gemara, these emails that are coming through in spam are driving me mad. Have you ever wanted to pick up your laptop and just smash it? Okay.
Yeah. I've also had the urge to pick up your laptop and smash it.
So what we're saying here is as follows, is that it's very different in the case of a beam. 2 reasons. Man is responsible for stopping suddenly without a warning. You can't be responsible for your cow stopping and being a boar because you can't control the mount of your cow. Secondly, the beam, the Mishnah wants to suggest that it could be a case where a beam is sprawled across the road and the barrel owner trips on it, he can't avoid it, whereas a cow is not that fat and there's plenty of road for the walking cow behind to be navigated by its owner around. So the Mishnah doesn't resemble Reish Lakish. So we're saying maybe there is a way, okay, that the end of the brisa actually supports perhaps Reish Lakish. Because the Mishnah says if Shimon was walking in the back of Reuven and the beam broke the jug, Shimon must pay. In other words, now it's the opposite way around. The jug is first, the beam's behind. Why must Shimon pay? Because he didn't pace the jug well and smashed into the jug. But if Reuven stopped, Shimon is exempt because Reuven, in essence, broke his own jug by stopping suddenly because he didn't give a warning. So this is like a walking cow damaging the crouching cow. And the Mishnah says he's exempt, okay? Why? Because in the Mishnah, now it's going to be rejected. It seems similar. Because in the Mishnah, Shimon was walking normally. In Reish Lakish's case, the walking cow should not have kicked. So we're saying these cases are not analogous. We're having a case where 2 things happen with the cows. Either the crouching cow kicks the walking cow or the walking cow kicks the crouching cow. In this particular case of the Mishnah, all that happens is that the beam owner knocked into the guy with a jug because he failed to give warning when he stopped. He didn't aggressively hit him. Does that make sense? It was an accident. Whereas the walking cow has no reason or license to kick the crouching cow. Now, that can be proven from the Mishnah's point of view. According to Reish Lakish, it's not the case. If your cow acted irregularly by crouching, another cow that reacts irregularly to that is off the hook because both cows acted irregularly, the one in reaction to the other. So we can see here it doesn't seem that the Mishnah, even in that case, resembles Reish Lakish. In terms of collisions in the Reshus HaRabim, the public domain, we want to perhaps make some sort of a conclusion. So we're going to say as follows. If Reuven was, okay, so basically we can see that maybe even if you look at the end of the brisa and you're doing it the other way around, it still isn't quite analogous to each other. I don't know if you can see what I'm saying, guys. So there doesn't seem to be a resolution. Again, it's not that Reish Lakish used this Mishnah as an example. One of his Talmudim used it as an example. Reish Lakish could have used a myriad of examples. He didn't have to use the example of this Mishnah. So it was what one of his students were perhaps proposing. Okay. So now we're going to deal with, before we deal with this week, today's one, I just want to end off and say that yesterday's one ended as follows. The Gemara rejects this proof in the Mishnah, which speaks of where the one with the beam is walking normally. It's indeed logical that he should be absolved from responsibility because he's minding his own business and the guy with the barrel didn't stop to warn him. The same as when it was the opposite way around. You have to warn a person if you stop suddenly, not to adjust your load. That's normal, but it just stop and smell the roses and rest and relax. But in Reish Lakish's case, it's different because the squatter or the squatting cow can say to the squatter, in other words, the owner of the squatting cow can say to the owner of the walking cow, granted, you have permission to walk on my animal because my animal just stopped in the public domain, but you have no permission to kick my animal. Does that make sense from this Mishnah? So it proves that the two are not analogous with each other. All right, guys, we're going to go on to today's subject. Have I summarized it okay?
Nice. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, good. Excellent. So let's head today. I'm going to share today's screen with you guys. And I want Gavin to read. Gavin?
The way, yeah? Yeah, I am. If two people were walking in the public thoroughfare, one was running and the other was walking, or both were running, and they did damage to one another, both are not liable to pay damage.
Excellent. So let's just break this up. If two people were walking in the public thoroughfare, one was running and the other was walking, or both were running, okay, and they did damage to one another, both are not liable to pay damages. Okay, so Rashi says there's only three possibilities with this case of the Mishnah. Number one, both were running. Number two, both were walking. Number three, one was running and one was walking. Does that make sense? Those are the only three possibilities there are. So the first part of this Mishnah talks about one running and one walking. And they did damage to each other. It says both were running. That's the second case. And it doesn't mention when both were walking. Okay? Why does it not mention when both were walking? Because that's obvious. How's it obvious? We said if this one has permission to be there and that one has permission to be there in the previous Mishnah, and they collided with each other, then nobody runs with beams, jugs, or barrels. So there we learn of a case with two people walking and colliding into each other. Fine. So that's already been discussed. The only two cases left to discuss is one's running, one's walking, or both are running. And it seems that for both of those extremes, you're not liable. Now we understand in the case of both people running why neither one's liable. Why is neither one liable if you're both running? Guys?
Because they're both equal.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Because they could go, they're going at the same pace, then they can go into each other. I don't know how to say it. They're going at the same pace, basically.
Exactly, that's perfect. So what?
But why did it say there, Damon? But it said at the beginning they both were walking. So why does it say they were walking?
It doesn't. It says.
The first sentence.
I'll share it with you now. Let me just share it with you now. It's a good question. Let me just share it with you now. It says if two people were walking in the public thoroughfare, that is option number one. But this is alluding to our previous Mishnah. So it does mention that, Kevin, as you said, two people were walking. That's option one, according to Rashi. Option two, one was walking and the other was running. Okay, that's option two. Option three, both were running. Those are your only three pace options of how people pace when they're going from point A to B. You're completely correct. I'm just saying it mentioned in the previous Mishnah that You're not liable if this one was walking towards this one and that one was walking, because they both have permission to be in the road. You're not liable for walking because exactly as you said, that's the normal way that people go through the public domain. So your question is, what if they're both running? Well, they both acted irregularly because nobody should be running in public. Accidents will happen at speed, okay? And therefore, why they're not liable? Because exactly as Kevin said, they're both going at a ridiculously fast pace, but both of them. And therefore, they're both equally negligent. So one cannot blame the other. So if there are two runners that are at the same pace, they're both acting irregularly and they don't have claims against each other. If both people are walking, they don't have claims against each other, but that's the right way to behave in the public domain. The only question is, in this Mishnah, why if one is running and one is walking, is the runner not liable? Because who's more likely to get damaged?
One walking.
Because he's being smacked by the faster paced individual and he's more in control of the walker. So we don't understand why the Gemara says that there's non-liability for the runner that smacks into the walker, because the runner was more negligent, because you shouldn't be running in the public domain. And so too our Gemara starts at this point. Okay. So the Gemara observes, apparently the Mishnah is not in accordance with the view of the Tana Isi ben Yehuda. For it was taught in a brisa concerning this case of our Mishnah, Rav Isi ben Yehuda says, the one who runs is liable because he acted irregularly. So that actually makes a lot of sense to me. Why? Because our Mishnah, although the Mishnah considers it permitted to run through the public domain, so the Mishnah doesn't agree, it seems, with Rav Isi ben Yehuda, because the Mishnah says he has permission to run in the public domain because it exempts a runner who does damage to a walker. That's how we know this. But Rav Isi considers running through a public domain a departure from the normality and the decorum and the rules that of what should be expected in the public domain. And therefore, he holds the runner liable. Our Mishnah, therefore, does not accord with the view of Rav Isi. Okay, so what we're going to try and do is see if it reconciles. And Rav Isi agrees concerning one who runs on the eve of the Sabbath at twilight. That's just before Shabbat comes in, that he is not liable to pay damages because at that time he runs with permission. What do we mean he runs with permission? Since he's engaged in Shabbos preparations, and he inadvertently crashes into another traveler in the public domain. He's not liable to pay damages because his behavior is not deemed irregular. Okay? Because the Gemara does permit running in the public domain on Friday at twilight. Obviously, the assumption being is that if you know for sure that the person isn't going to perform any such mitzvah, the guy's a rogue, he's going to run to play soccer, we don't give him freedom in that particular case. He's liable. But in this case, it's saying you do have permission getting ready for Shabbos to do that. Right. So the Gemara now introduces a rule of Rav Yochanan. Because Rav Yochanan says the halacha follows Isi ben Yehuda, that running in the public domain is considered irregular, except for Friday at twilight. So then you should ask, but did Rav Yochanan really say this? Because Rav Yochanan said that the halacha follows an anonymous Mishnah. And we learned in our anonymous Mishnah here, if one was running and the other was walking, or both were running, they are not liable. So we're saying, hang on, there's two things that are contradicting each other. We're learning halacha from Rav Isi ben Yehuda that says that the runner is liable if he crashes into the walker because it's inappropriate behavior in the public domain. And the halacha does follow him. That's what Rav Yochanan said. And Rav Yochanan also says that halacha follows this anonymous Mishnah, which says if a runner and walker crash into each other in the public domain, the halacha is he's not liable. So what's going on here? It seems like a bit of a contradiction. Okay, Kev, are you following? Seems like a bit of a contradiction. Kev, what have I just said, what?
There's a contradiction.
Can I repeat it for a sentence?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, repeat it.
All right, so just I know you're tired, just concentrate on this sentence. We can't figure out why the Rav Yochanan says the halacha follows the Mishnah, and it also follows Rav Issa ben Yehuda, because they have two conflicting views. Rav Issa ben Yehuda says that the runner is liable if he injures in the public domain because it's an inappropriate behavior. Rav Yochanan said that the synonymous Mishnah we've just read now says that if a runner and walker crash into each other in the public domain, neither are liable. So they seem to say that there's halacha, but these halachas contradict each other. So we're trying to find some resolution. Okay. So how do we do that? Very simple. So they're obviously not in court. The Gemara answers, our Mishnah does follow the view. Our Mishnah, this one, actually does follow the view of Rav Issi, because the Mishnah refers to one who was running on the eve of Shabbat at twilight, when even Rav Issi agrees that it is permitted to run in the public domain. From what can we deduce that our Mishnah is referring to Friday at twilight? From the fact that the Mishnah states, or if both were running, they are not liable. So what it's saying is that this Mishnah and Rav Issi ben Yehuda are not contradicting each other. They're saying, listen, even Rav Issi would agree that you are not liable, where it generally holds somebody liable during the week, if you're preparing for Shabbat, because there you're preparing in order to do mitzvahs and getting ready for Shabbos, you're not liable. Okay? And then there's a question that comes up. So why do I need the clause, or if they were both running, they are not liable? Because, let me give you an example. The chiddush is if one was running and one was walking, they're not liable. That's something new to learn, because then we say, okay, so the runner isn't liable in this circumstance, even though he was acting irregularly. But to turn around and say, why was it necessary for the Mishnah to state where both are running, they're not liable? Because it seems obvious that they're both acting inadvertently in the public domain. So why mention the obvious? Okay? If one was running and the other was walking, even the runner is not liable. That's the chiddush. So in what cases are these things stated? In the case of the eve of Shabbat at twilight. But during the week, however, if one was running and the other was walking, the runner is liable. If, however, both were running, then they are not liable even during the week, because both were acting irregularly. So there, now we've got clarity. During the week, both running, neither's got a claim against each other because they're both acting irregularly in the public domain. During the week, if the runner runs into the walker, even though they're both collided with each other, the runner is liable during the week. But on Shabbat, he's not, because he has permission to run to prepare for the Shabbat. Okay, so we have reconciled it. Okay, let me just admit Kevin.
How did we lose it?
I don't know. Kevin? Kev?
The internet just went off. The internet went down for like 30 seconds. That's what happened.
All right, let's just go through this quickly. So what I'm saying is as follows. The reconciliation is very straightforward. Rav Issi ben Yehuda and the Mishnah agree, okay? You're walking during the week and one person's running and the runner crashes into the walker, the runner is liable. If the same thing happens at the twilight on the eve of Shabbos, the runner isn't liable because he has permission to run to get ready and do mitzvahs for the Shabbos, even though during the week that's considered irregular behavior, okay? But if both people were running during the week, neither are liable because they both were acting irregularly. That's the bottom line. All right, let me just conclude quickly. The Gemara elaborates on the Bryce above. The master said in the Bryce, and Itzi agrees concerning one who runs on the eve of the Shabbat at twilight that he's not liable because at that time he runs with permission. What permission is there to run on the eve of Shabbat? The Gemara answers, Itzi refers to running such as in order to fill that practice of Rav Chanina. For Rav Chanina would say at twilight on the eve of Shabbat. Okay. What happens is you go out, come, let us go out to greet the bride, the queen, as others might have reported it, to greet the Shabbat, the bride, the queen. I don't know if you know that song, Boyi Bakala, Boyi Bashalom, Lachadodi. So this is exactly the practice there. Come, O bride, come, O bride. Rav Yana would cloak himself and stand in his place. It was part of singing Lachadodi that you'd run in the streets and you grant the Shabbat with enthusiasm. It was known as the bride because it was considered the groom. Eretz Israel was considered the groom and Shabbat the bride. Both of those things keep each other in check and observing of the Torah for the affection that we have for the Shabbat, that we should say such a thing. Obviously, okay, so we've covered that Mishnah entirely. Guys, we've completed that Mishnah. That was done very, very quickly. We've got a few minutes left. I need to just cover one thing quickly. Yeah, guys, come. I need to cover one thing quickly, and then Kevin's going to teach us. There are certain issues that are going to come up. Okay, this year, Pesach falls out after Shabbat. So it presents a number of changes very quickly. The three main prohibitions in Pesach, don't eat chometz. You can't benefit from chometz. In other words, you can't give it to a pet or a worker or sell it. You can't derive any sort of indirect or direct benefit. You can't own chometz. So it's important to keep that in mind, that the prohibitions of eating and benefiting start already on Erev Pesach. So the Torah prohibition starts already from midday, but Chazal forbade it even earlier. So you must stop eating chometz, okay, after the 4th hour after sunrise. It's about 10 a.m. And you mustn't get benefit from it after the 5th hour after sunrise at about 11 a.m. So in Israel this year, the clock changes to daylight saving on the Friday before Pesach. Just bear this in mind. It was by Rabbi Daniel Brody. So we'll give out the exact times closer to Pesach as they depend on each place. Just quickly, there are 3 ways to avoid the prohibition of not owning chometz. You've got to sell it. You've got to speak to your local rav and fill out the document. You've got to destroy it. You've got to get rid of it. You've got to disown it. Those are the 3 ways. Checking and burning. The difference this year, there's a difference. So Chazal help us avoid eating and owning chometz. They made a decree. You have to check for chometz the night before Pesach with a candlelight and burn it on the morning before Pesach. Problem is this year, the night and day before Pesach is Shabbat. So checking and burning chometz on Erev Pesach this year is not possible. So it's pushed a day earlier. So it has to start on Thursday night. So please keep this in mind. The B'dikat chometz for checking for chometz is on Thursday night, the 25th of March. And the chometz, biur chometz, burning of the chometz is on Friday morning, the 26th of March. So we'll discuss this closer to the time. Kevin, take it away, sir. Teach us.
Okay. Yes. Okay, let's see, where did we go? Okay, we discussed business. Okay, now we're going to discuss Torah study on Shabbos. Rabbi Brachia said in the name of Rav Chia Bar Abba, the Shabbos was given for Oneg. Rav Chagai said in the name of Rav Shmuel Bar Nachman, the Shabbos was given for the study of Torah. And that's in Pesikta Rabasi, in the Yerushalmi Shabbos, Perek 78a. These 2 views do not contradict each other. Rav Brachia's statement refers to scholars who have been engaged in Torah study throughout the week. Rav Chaggai's statement applies to those who are not engaged to full-time Torah study. It is therefore established practice for laymen to meet in the synagogue on Shabbos to attend the rabbi's shir. When the time of the Shabbos meal is likely to clash with the time of the local shir, priority is given to the latter. And the essential form of Torah study is learning the weekly Sidra, which is the weekly Parsha. In order that it is understood in its entirety, it should be read twice and the Targum Onkelos once. If one studies Rashi instead of Targum Onkelos, one has fulfilled one's duty, since Rashi also provides the basic explanations. So basically, ideally one should read it in Hebrew and then in English, and then whether with a with one of the interpretations. I don't know how many. Some people don't. I do it. Is that okay? The charming bells. Okay, Gavin.
Sorry.
Okay.
Well,
No worries. Okay.
Charming bells are the charming bells. They're not charming.
So anyway, so that's. I mean, I always I do the parsha every week. I try to do Hebrew and with English. I don't always do the whole thing like some people. I know some people that do. But let's just go back one step here. In the previous point, it says priority should be given to the local shir if your Shabbos meal clashes with the shir.
Priority should be given to the shir. Is that what you say?
Yeah, it says therefore established practice for laymen to meet in the shul on Shabbos to attend the rabbi's shir. When the time of one Shabbos meal is likely to clash with the time of the local shir, priority is given to the latter. Now, what's the latter? Is that the meal, or is it must be the meal? The meal, because it's with family, and it's very important to be with family on Shabbos. I mean, so people, the rabbis wouldn't usually schedule shiurim at the time when most people you normally eat. They'd have it schedule it for another time.
Agreed. Agreed.
Anything on that, Arthur or Gavin?
I'm good.
Just an easy way to do it is generally, if you've got the Midrash says, it's an amazing publication because it takes the Mishnah Rabbah and all sorts of very complicated Mishnayot and he puts it together in one concise volumes that even teenagers can enjoy. And I even enjoy learning from that, where you learn the Chumash and you learn the Midrash says. It adds a lot of depth. It's very easy to go through. I prepare for the Gemara Shir on Shabbat, so it's good to get into it. Preparation for Shabbos before ensures that you have a good Shabbos, and it mimics one of the reasons Hashem gave us Shabbat is we must know this world is meant to prepare for the next world, and if you don't prepare in this world, you're going to have an awful next world. If you don't prepare before Shabbos your meals and your cooking, by the time Shabbos comes, it's not going to be a time of joy. So the marshal there is that once Shabbos comes in, it's out of the bounds of time. There's nothing you can do further in terms of getting ready. It's the same thing in the next world. You leave with what you leave with. So it's very important we take every day and every opportunity in this world to build our Shabbos in the next world.
Let's go.